Hey everyone, we're Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey y'all.
So, what we're going to be talking about today is a look at the 2020 presidential election, but Bernie Sanders jumps into the election and he runs as an independent. What would happen here is that he would split the vote between him and Joe Biden, and which this would make the map look significantly different.
With that being said, let's get right into it. So as Eric has mentioned before, the vote will be split in several of these states. California will remain solid. You know what? Washington, Oregon, I think they'll remain solid as well.
Okay.
But what will go to the likely and narrow the margin up, DC will stay solid, but I do think the Northeast, like all of the Northeast, will be turning more and more to a narrow margin at this point.
Yeah.
We're on my accent. We'll talk about Vermont later. New Hampshire we'll talk about later as well. First district will go likely still. Hawaii will be solid. Illinois. I think that's all for the Democrats. Now we're going to take a look at the state Trump states. Let's
This
see.
doesn't change that much. We have
Yep.
the middle of the country, and we're gonna go down south.
Yeah. Let's talk about these two later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Looks about right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think the first one I want to talk about is Iowa. Iowa, in our previous projections, we put sometimes as likely, sometimes as lean. In the event that Bernie Sanders does run, I do think he's gonna significantly split the vote between him and Joe Biden. If we look back in 2020, actually, yeah, 2020 primaries, Bernie Sanders nearly won. He won the popular vote, but he lost the delegate count to Pete Buttigieg, and Biden did finish in a distant fifth.
Not
So,
good.
looking at that, I do honestly think that if Trump were to jump into the race, I mean, sorry, Sanders were to jump into the race, Trump would carry this in a safe. Iowa did vote very red for Donald Trump in 2016. It was like 8%. It was more than Texas, that I remember. So, thinking about that, I do think Iowa will probably go in a safe margin. Do you agree with that, Eric?
Yeah, I agree with that. Bernie Sanders will definitely take a toll on the voters here.
Yep, Eric. You want to discuss Ohio?
So for Ohio here, I think what will result in here is that Ohio will get the likely solid margin right somewhere in between. Without Bernie Sanders running, we did put this as like a lean likely or likely somewhere in the middle, but because Bernie Sanders is running, he is splitting the vote, and this gives the Republicans the head up in the
Yeah,
state.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think I would put this one as likely still, maybe even solid sometimes, but I do think likely would be the right characterization here. Now, let's say if Texas, it was likely before. If Bernie jumps in, I'm not sure if it'll do that much of a difference. I'm going to be honest here. I do think it's still going to be in a likely margin. I don't think that it's going to really hurt Biden that much here. The same can be said about Georgia. Georgia, I also believe, will be in a likely margin. Um, Joe Biden has a great support of the African American voters, and Georgia has a lot of those Georgia has a lot of those in Georgia. So, with that being said, I do think that Georgia will also go in a likely margin to Joe Biden still. Now, we're going to talk about more of the states in the Northeast. These are the states that will get probably hit the most by Bernie Sanders jumping in because Bernie Sanders is from the state of Vermont, which is in the Northeast, and he grew up in New York City. So I do think the Northeast will get hit a lot due to Joe Biden joining, and that includes the Midwest as well. So let's talk about Vermont right now. Vermont, Bernie Sanders didn't perform the best in the primaries. He got 56, 55% of the vote. However, this is his home state, and personally, I put the state between lean and likely because he's very popular as a senator. He's the most popular senator in the United States, um, and people really do approve of him. In fact, in 2016, Bernie Sanders actually finished third in Vermont, which is quite interesting because he didn't even run in the actual election because he wasn't nominated. But a lot of people wrote in his name which kind of shows the support he has. 5%. That's more than the national average that Gary Johnson had. With that being said, I do think that Vermont will be between a likely and a lean margin. Personally, I think I'd go with likely here because he does have the support of his voters in Vermont. I do think he will carry this in a likely margin, especially splitting the vote from Joe Biden. Oh, I forgot New York. New York, I think, will also still go in a safe margin to Joe Biden. I don't think that's going to change much. How about Virginia? Virginia is quite interesting. We usually put this one as a likely D. In the event that Bernie Sanders were to run, he is going to split the vote here. Uh, with that being said, I do think that Joe Biden should still be able to carry because it has been moving more to the left. But in a slimmer margin, I think lead would be a fair characterization. Eric, you want to talk about Florida?
Yeah, so Florida, I think, would practically stay the same. Before we gave it a tilt Republican, Florida is a swing state. And I think, Bernie Sanders does not help Joe Biden in this state. So I think either lean or, no, I mean tilt or tilt, but with a little bit of lean. But I think tilt is
Interesting.
the correct
Really,
categorization.
I actually do think that Bernie Sanders running will hurt Joe Biden's chances in Florida. I do think that Bernie Sanders will be able to lessen a lot of that vote, and I do think Joe Biden will lose the state in a lean margin to Donald Trump. So I do think this state will be lean Republican.
Okay.
Tilt does seem fair though. I think it's somewhere in between.
Yeah,
You
that's what I
know,
tried to
it's,
say, but again, I don't know. You can't really put middle on this map,
yeah,
so
I guess
you got to
so.
take a stance.
Yeah, you know what? Let's go lean. I think lean makes sense
All
because
right.
there is going to be a difference here
Mm-hmm.
if Sanders does choose to run.
Yep.
Let's talk about this blue wall now.
Yeah, this is the, I just want to add, this is going to be the difference between, this is the biggest difference between Joe Biden without Sanders and with Sanders running. And especially we all know what happening in the news in Minnesota. It's definitely going to take a toll on Biden.
Yeah, so I've circled out here the states that were won by each candidate in 2016. Trump carried these three, while Biden was carried. Well, I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton was able to carry the state of Minnesota. So this will make the difference between a win or a loss for either candidate
Mm-hmm.
because with Joe Biden carrying it, he wins the election.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it's gonna really come down to the vice presidential pick.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it will make a huge difference. Like if Joe Biden chooses Amy Klobuchar, that might prove to be an issue in Minnesota with the recent news coming out that she didn't fire the officer that brutally assaulted and killed
George Floyd.
George Floyd. Um, I still think Joe Biden will. No, I no no.
There, I
I
don't think there's
think
a
it goes to Trump.
chance.
Yeah, I think it goes to Trump. Pennsylvania definitely, I think, will go to Trump. I've mentioned this in past videos. This part, the western part of Pennsylvania, is much more rural, much more conservative than uh, the east part of Pennsylvania near New York City, Philadelphia here. Um,
With
so yeah, I do
Sanders,
think that
yeah.
yeah, especially with Sanders in the race, it's going to split the Democratic vote. And I think Michigan is actually, in my opinion, usually we characterize Michigan as lean. With Bernie Sanders jumping into the race, I think it becomes a pure toss up. Because
Mm.
usually, or was it leaner till? I actually don't remember, but I do
I think
think
we put
that
it as tilt.
interesting. Okay, well, yeah, I do think that Michigan will go to a toss up with Bernie Sanders jumping in. Wisconsin is a different story. I think this one goes to Trump definitely.
Yeah.
Um, with the vote splitting here, probably in a lean actually. Usually we put this one between toss up and tilt. In this scenario, I do think it will go in a lean margin to the president. Minnesota, I think Biden will be able to carry it, but it will be very very slim tilt. I think it's going to be a
Hmm.
tilt, very slim. probably less than
Yeah.
it was carried in 2016. Um, it's it's going to be quite interesting when we get to 2016. But with Sanders jumping in and splitting the Democratic vote here, it's going to prove to be an issue to Joe Biden. Usually, this is lean or actually likely, I think. But
Yeah.
with that happening, I don't think that will be possible. So yeah, I do think lean tilt makes sense here.
Mhm.
I think I forgot to mention Nebraska second district. I think Nebraska second district with the vote splitting, it's going to be likely to Donald Trump. Usually it's lean. I think it's going to be likely now. Um, North Carolina. Eric, you want to discuss North Carolina?
Sure, yeah, I will. So North Carolina, I think with Sanders in the race, especially North Carolina being a battleground state, this definitely helps Donald Trump a lot. I would give this a lean categorization. What do you
Yeah,
think?
and I agree with that. Initially, I was going to say likely, but after I did think about it a bit more, I think it will be a lean tilt. Do we usually get this one tilt? I don't remember actually. I think we usually give
Yeah,
tilt, but
yeah,
I do agree with the lean characterization here. Let's head to Maine now. Maine Allstate went very narrowly to Hillary Clinton in 2016, about a percentage. With Sanders, that's definitely going to kind of split the vote here. I think it's a pure toss up.
yeah,
Um, second district, however, I think it's likely.
yeah.
Usually it's lean, especially with the vote splitting. It will almost certainly go to Trump. Now let's in New Hampshire. I personally feel like New Hampshire might be the greatest state that well, with the exception of Vermont, the biggest state that Bernie Sanders might impact here. And the reason for that is because Bernie Sanders lives right next door in Vermont. And in both 2016 and 2020, Bernie Sanders has performed extremely well in New Hampshire. So, in my opinion, I think that New Hampshire, usually, but this one is likely, but with Bernie Sanders in the race, I think it moves to a tilt. It's actually between tilt and lean, but I do think the effect is great there enough that it will impact it enough to go to a tilt.
Yeah. Vermont is right next to New Hampshire, so that will definitely affect the voters there.
All right, Eric, you want to talk about Arizona?
Yeah, so Arizona, we say is swinging more to the left. The seats in the House flipped in Arizona for the most part. But when Bernie Sanders runs, this will definitely take a toll on Joe Biden's performance. So this gives Donald Trump the leg up. So in this case, I would give this a lean. Yeah, I would give it a lean.
Yeah, I agree
Pretty
with
comfortable margin because, the splitting of the votes is a very huge factor here.
that. Definitely. Now we got New Mexico and Colorado. Usually, it's likely in this event. I do think that it will go to Joe Biden, but definitely slimmer than it usually is, especially considering Colorado, especially is this kind of new swing state now. Sorry, no, new Democratic state. It used to be pretty swing. I think George W. Bush won this state in 2004, I think, as well as 2000. So that's quite interesting here. I think that yes, it will go with Joe Biden, but it's going to be in a slimmer margin. And that
Mm,
comes down to our final state, Nevada. Nevada, usually we put this one as likely. To be quite honest here, I think Trump will do pretty well in Nevada. It's going to be definitely closer. I think some sources, I remember putting this one as lean with Akshat, but we usually put this one as likely. In my opinion, I think Nevada will probably be lean or tilt. Depends who you ask, but personally, that's where I'd put it. But I do think it's going to be lean, just like Colorado, New Mexico. With Sanders coming to the race, I think it will still be a lean margin here for Joe Biden. Um, yeah, that seems to be it. Let's head back to Michigan. If we had to declare in Michigan a winner, who do you think you would put, Eric?
hmm. In Michigan, if we had to put a leader, so there's a lot of factors to consider here. Firstly, you have Bernie Sanders running. That's been the factor across this whole video. Second thing to consider is how, in general, Gretchen Whitmer and Donald Trump are in a kind of tense relationship right now. So that kind of, puts it as a stalemate. If I had to give it to somebody,
I think I'd give it
uh,
to Trump, honestly. What would you think
yeah,
about
I
that?
mean, he did win
Yeah.
it in 2016, so that shows that it is somehow possible for him to win it again, and especially with the coronavirus and Bernie Sanders hypothetically in this race definitely gives Trump the leg up.
So I think it's quite interesting to think about because Hillary Clinton actually lost Michigan in the 2020 Democratic primaries. Joe Biden won this state against Bernie Sanders in 2020 in a respectable margin, which is quite interesting to think about. But I do think Bernie Sanders clearly has some support in Michigan, and that we need to address that. Personally, I do put the state tilt. If we have to characterize it, it's between tilt and toss up, but I do think tilt makes sense here.
Yep.
With that, we got our final map here. 3 of 6. That's actually quite interesting because 3 of 6,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting to look at. This is very close to the exact map of the 2016 map, with the only difference between Vermont. Vermont going to Bernie Sanders. Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't even notice that until now.
Mm.
With that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please hit the subscribe button. We'll see you in our next video tomorrow.